So this one, this graph is showing us obviously international terrorist attacks have been on the rise. And if you look right here around 2008, they start to climb. Looks like they've been climbing for a long time. It says international terrorist attacks. So terrorist attacks in places like Iraq, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Nigeria, and Syria. And then it really hits, it really spikes here around 2011, right? Which is when the Twin Towers were attacked here in the United States. So one reason for this, or one possible reason for this, is, Al-Qaeda got a lot of media attention. They're kind of this small terrorist organization. They claim to be very big and have all kinds of power, and they attacked the most powerful, nation on earth. And in their eyes, many of them got away with it. And so what that does is that kind of gives a lot of other terrorist organizations reason to try to get that same kind of attention brought to their causes and their concerns and things like that. You'll notice that it's mostly in Iraq, Afghanistan, Pakistan. That's where most of the terrorist attacks are happening. Okay, if you look at the United States and you look at how many times have there been terrorist attacks on U.S. soil, what you're going to find is, yes, they're mostly from U.S. citizens. Okay, so most of the terrorist attacks that have been committed here, they're not the 9/11s. Okay, and if you want to know more about that, look up Timothy McVeigh, okay, or look up Ted Kaczynski. Okay.
All right, so the terrorist thing is that they feel they have no way to negotiate through proper channels, that they need to bring attention to themselves by acts that the media will follow. Like we have a group here in the United States that I'm sympathetic towards, but up here I'm like, nah, it's called PETA, the People for Ethical Treatment of Animals. I like that. But then they would, blow up car dealerships that had leather seats in the cars. And you're like, because they're trying to get attention through violence, okay? So we see that in terrorist groups, and the media does focus on it. When you look at the number of terrorists in the world, it's pretty small, but we're afraid of them, so they get a lot of attention, so that's why they do those things, all right? So we all know about the Twin Towers. I don't think you guys were alive yet. This is the first group that wasn't alive yet. All right, but we're going to talk about the history of what was going on here and why that happened, okay? All right, so if we look at the map, Osama bin Laden is from the bin Laden family in Saudi Arabia, which they are the contractors that build the oil well sites. They're big in business with us. The Bushes and the bin Laden family are like this, and you're like, whoa, wait a second. Well, he is the black sheep of the family, all right? He's like, why are we dealing with these infidels? They are satanic. They drink, they smoke. Their women don't, they're not modest. Why are we dealing with them? And the family pays him to stay away, all right? Imagine getting $150 million a year to stay away because you're obnoxious, all right? So one of the first things he does is he goes over here to Afghanistan because the Russians, remember we said that the Soviets are freaking out about their people getting this 8th century idea like the Taliban has of how to run Islam. So they go down there to crush it. Osama bin Laden goes over to fight the Russians, and an enemy of the Russians is an enemy of us. We give him all of the ammo, everything he needs to fight the Russians, and he basically wins. So he's kind of like Lafayette was to us, who came over with French help during our revolution. They see Osama bin Laden as kind of their Lafayette. This guy's a cool guy who helped us get rid of the Russians, all right? So after that, then he starts turning his attention to what's happening over here, and it's America in the Holy Land, all right? They blow up the USS Cole, or they try to, a ship, they blow a big hole in it. There's attacks on Americans, and he's not getting anywhere. And where he really had kind of what made him flip was during the first war with Iraq, Desert Storm in '91, Saudi Arabia invited in the United States and paid for 90% if we would kick the Iraqis out of Kuwait. Where we got Kuwait? I don't have my glasses on. All right, I'm guessing right there. And the U.S. soldiers came and were in the Holy Land. And that's when Osama bin Laden turned on us and put all of his attention to us. Like you said, they bombed the coal, they did some different things, not getting anywhere. So that's when they bombed the Twin Towers. It's the World Trade Center, the center of capitalism. All right, so he thought, well, I'll end capitalism, Western capitalism. I'll attack the Pentagon. That is the home of Western defense. Not only Americans, but other countries in NATO have offices there. I'll take them out. And then the third attack was supposed to take out the White House, but that's the plane that went down in Pennsylvania where the passengers went into the cabin, took, and forced the plane down. Okay, so this is an international organization. Where we get confused is then ISIS comes about and everybody thinks they're the same. Well, what they're trying to do is they're trying to bring back this old caliphate from the 8th century that is Iraq. You've got Iraq, Syria. So it's the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria. And if you changed it to Arabic, it would be ISIL. All right. And then you'll notice that the Obama administration was calling it Daesh. That was an Arabic acronym, which actually sounded like it was a put down. So that's why they were trying to use that. These guys wanted to be called ISIS, and that's why the Obama administration wouldn't call them that. So this was kind of a more localized thing, just like the Taliban is localized in Afghanistan, all right? And Boko Haram is here in this region, and they're trying to go back to that primitive 8th century type of Islam there, all right? So you've got, these are local. So you've got to know a distinction about region. It's small scale, large scale. These are smaller scale or local, ISIS and Boko Haram, if they brought up Taliban, whereas Al-Qaeda is large scale. That's an international terrorist organization, and they're trying to get the West out of the Arab world. I think at its height, Al-Qaeda claimed 35,000 members. All right, so we're all freaking out about that. But that's kind of a small number. That doesn't mean it's insignificant, but there's 1.5 billion Muslims, and so as far as terrorists go, that's pretty small. And I always say, who's the most afraid of organizations like Al-Qaeda, Taliban, Boko Haram? It's Muslims, because they're trying to turn the clock back to the 8th century, and they want to run a world that way. Okay? Have I got one more? Or is that you?
That's me.
That's you. Okay.
All right. So this one is showing us. This one's showing us the tip here of Saudi Arabia. This is Yemen. Okay. Those of you who've done the maps, you guys know where this is. And basically, this is talking about ISIS, but it says a branch of Al-Qaeda controls part of Yemen in a complex civil war there. So ISIS is a little complicated, and we get it mixed up with Al-Qaeda because they had affiliations for a while, and then around 2014 they're like, nah, we're not going to be able to work this out, and they went their separate ways. What's happening here in Yemen, this has been an atrocious civil war, and it says up here, Al-Qaeda, area controlled by Al-Qaeda. Saudi Arabia and also Iraq are very, very concerned. See, the ISIS are Sunni Muslims. Remember we said that, Iraq at least is the Shia Muslims. But what they're afraid of here is there's a lot of oil fields, and they're worried that that Yemen is going to control all these oil fields, and Saudi Arabia is going to lose out on a lot of money. Okay. Okay, so this one here, like Mr. Wright was saying, so we got ISIL in green, that's ISIS, okay? You've got some Syrian opposition in Iraq, and what they're saying is, the big idea here is that ISIS claims to control or to have sway over all Muslims, but especially in areas like Syria and Iraq, okay? And so that's sort of the big issue here. Now, do they actually have that much control? No, they are an organization, but they don't have near as much power as they say they do. Okay, one of the things that I wanted Mr. Wright to talk a little bit about was state-sponsored terrorism, and I think we're going to get into that in the next one. But I remember, him talking about one time that Lebanon was very, they're Sunni Muslims, and so they allowed a lot of weapons to be funneled through their country and then make it into Syria. And so a lot of the war that you see in Syria are actually, hopefully we're at the ends of that now. A lot of that ISIS funded or ISIS controlled war, there were other countries that kind of, helped out, okay? So, state support for terrorism, sanctuary for terrorists in Pakistan. Mr. Wright probably talked about Osama bin Laden. He got sanctuary because there's a tribal law which says if anyone comes to your tribe and asks for sanctuary, you have to give it to them. It's a custom going back many centuries, and the idea is that it's very barren up there. There's not much food, really hard to survive without other people. And so he kind of used that in order to stay isolated or hidden from the United States. I talked a little bit about supplying terrorists in Iraq and Iran. Mr. Wright, I think will continue that, and then also more about Libya, okay, sponsoring terrorist attacks in Libya. Oh, and now mine's doing this now. What the heck? There you go.
Okay, so the whole thing about sanctuary, remember Osama bin Laden is hiding in Afghanistan, and we actually go there with Army Rangers. Am I in? Okay. But we lost focus. We had a previous war in Iraq, remember Desert Storm, and President Bush's advisors saying, this Osama bin Laden guy, will get him. All right, we've got to go in and we've got to take out Saddam Hussein. The Iraqis had nothing to do with 9/11, but the advisors for Bush they were there with George H.W. Bush, and they thought this was more important, and so we lost focus there. So we only had some Army Rangers in there, maybe 150,000 troops, and we were counting on warlords to help us catch Osama bin Laden, and we were paying them. Well, bin Laden's paying them more, and he escapes. We don't get him. And he hides out here in northern Pakistan for 6 years, all right? And it took us that long to trace it down. There's some ideas. Unfortunately, it was a woman in the CIA who broke it, and because she was a woman, they didn't believe her. There was that whole controversy, but we finally got him. It was under President Obama that he's taken out in this compound, not very far from the Pakistani military academy that we finance. So it is all kind of frustrating, but as Mr. Hillstrom said, there's this whole code of honor, and this is a very old school part of the world, all right, that the Pakistani government has to deal with. It's like, well, if we make them mad, they'll turn on us, so there's certain things we're going to ignore, okay? All righty, now Iran, President Bush called it part of the axis of evil, and I know that President Trump is not happy with them. Obama's idea was to try to get them to join some kind of treaty where you could get in there and monitor them. President Trump believes that sanctions is a better way to deal with it. Two different schools of thought. What their worry is they feel that they want to change from an oil economy. That's smart, but their idea is more nuclear. I don't know if that's the best idea, but what we worry about is them having the nuclear material to make bombs. And this is what we talked about, that Shia Muslim branch, and they're against Israel. They're trying to win these proxy wars. They're financing down in Yemen that they could really destabilize the region. So that is why we've been so hard on Iran, because they're going nuclear, and we don't want them to go to nuclear as long as they're providing support to Hezbollah and that Shia version of terrorism. Okay? All righty. And there's the end. Okay.
All right. Hey, you guys, we're gonna have a Zoom meeting next week. We have our last video on Monday. We'll get out to you. And I've been doing a webinar learning more about what online testing will look like. So stay tuned.
Okay. And then last but not least, please, oh please, oh please, go through your chapters. If you understand the chapter review, you're gold. And then we're putting a lot of time into those PDFs, so please read them. those are the test writers. We want to do what they're doing.
Use the vocab.